Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. We here at EuroACE are delighted to be cooperating with the Innovate project and their partners Energy Cities and Energy Demain to bring you this webinar this afternoon on the topic of one-stop shops. My name is Adrian Joyce. I'm the Secretary General of EuroACE, and I'm going to be the moderator for this webinar today. I'm very, very pleased with the quality of the speakers we have, and I know that the subject is of great interest and very pertinent to plans at European level around the creation of a renovation wave. So I expect that we are all going to learn and enjoy this webinar this afternoon. Before we start, I just thought I would like to give you a few words about how to behave on the call, and we ask you to do this for everyone's comfort. First of all, you are kindly asked to remain muted. Note that I would mute you if I think you've not found the button. No cameras to be used for the whole duration of the webinar. That helps us with bandwidth and quality of audio. Only the speakers and myself as moderator will unmute while we speak. And during the presentations, please be typing questions into the chat box so that during the 20 to 25 minutes question and answer session, we can answer as many of the questions that have come to your mind as possible. Your questions should be as short as possible, and if they're directed to one of the four speakers, please say to which one. I will then try and group the questions and address them to the speakers, having reread them. And if we don't get to all the questions, we will forward them to the speakers afterwards and try to get back to you within a week or so. And yes, this PowerPoint presentation and the questions will be shared with you in a follow-up email. So just before I hand over to my colleague Jana to introduce the topic of today, a word about EuroACE. We are a European trade association with 13 member companies from the building products, building equipment, controls and services sector. You see the logos of our companies here. Those companies together in the EU employ directly more than 200,000 people, and they are employed at more than 1,000 production facilities and office locations in the EU. And our work centres entirely around EU-level policy and policy on energy efficiency of buildings, both new and existing. Today, I'll just briefly remind you of the agenda. We are online for about 75 minutes, and we have 4 speakers, each of whom have been asked to speak for approximately 10, no more than 12 minutes, in order to allow for the question and answer session to be lively and extensive. So without any further delay, I would like to pass over to Jana Chichmanova from the Innovate project partner Energy Cities. Jana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And hello, everybody. And thank you also for co-organizing this event together with Energy Cities and Energy Demain. It was a very good idea. I would like to say also a couple of words about Energy Cities to introduce our organization and then myself. If you can go to the next slide, please. So Energy Cities, and the next, thank you. Energy Cities is a European association of cities in energy transition. We have more than 1,000 city countries, which are small to big cities with very diverse ambitions. This is also a coordinator of the European Innovate project, which will be presented on the next slides. Innovate project is funded by Horizon 2020 program. It started in 2017 and is coming to its end in October 2020. On the next slide, I would like to introduce the project partners. So our main partner is Énergie des Mares, who has very rich expertise and knowledge on the one-stop shops and integrated home renovation programs in France. And then we have mainly local and regional authorities as project partners. For example, Brussels Environment from Brussels Capital Region in Belgium, Frederikshavn Municipality in Denmark, Herlen Municipality in the Netherlands, Litoměřice Municipality in the Czech Republic, Mantova in Italy, and Aradipo in Cyprus. We also have energy agencies on board, for example, AGENEX, which is Extremadura Energy Agency in Spain, or Riga Energy Agency from Latvia. We have one university, Linnaeus University from Sweden, which is very closely working with the municipality of Växjö and Kronoberg County. And we also have two private partners from the private sector, Parity Projects from the United Kingdom, which is very closely working with the Retrofit Works Cooperative of installers, and then KAW in the Netherlands, which are running a chain of one-stop shops in 6 Netherlands. Maybe to introduce also the topic, not only our project. Maybe I don't need to say why the building renovation, and especially the renovation of private residential buildings, is very important if the Europe wants to achieve its energy and climate targets. From our members and also the Covenant of Mayors signatories, we know that the residential sector actually represents a huge part in the cake of the CO2 emissions of the city. It's usually more than 30%. And the local and regional authorities who want to achieve also its own energy and climate goals really have to target this sector if they want to achieve it. And on the next slide, please. Our ambition of the local authorities should be to achieve deep energy retrofits, because we have less and less time to achieve our targets, and we have to be ambitious. And we also think, on the next slide, that the good solution to achieve this deep energy renovation and to make it more massive and more ambitious in general, it's to set up local and regional one-stop shops for integrated home energy renovation. And there could be many different definitions of what one-stop shop means. We also tackled this problem of the definition in the beginning of our project. And we agree that it is a place, ideally a unique place, where citizens, homeowners, can come and they can get an advice and the support from A to Z in their renovation project, which is aiming at the global energy renovation. So this one-stop shop should offer services like targeted marketing and communication that is really based on the market segmentation of the local territory. It should provide the homeowners with the energy renovation plan and tailor-made financial plan, because different homeowners, they're eligible for different public incentives, let's say, and also the financial situation is very different. They should get access, if they wish, to the support with the coordination of the whole renovation process, so that the homeowners don't need to deal with individual suppliers, installers, and so on. They are not alone in the process of looking for these suppliers, checking the quotes that they provide, making sure that the quotes are not too high, not coordinating all of them and telling them who should start with the insulation or whether the PV panels should be installed first. So all this coordination should be managed by the one-stop shop. And it should also provide long-term and affordable financing, especially for those homeowners who are in more vulnerable situation, maybe to also very low and low-income households, which otherwise would be forgotten in the process if the financing was, for example, only relying on commercial banks. And at the end, last and not least, it's to guarantee the one-stop shop should also guarantee and monitor in a long term the results and the energy savings, the quality of the works, and ideally energy savings that were achieved thanks to the home energy renovation. So this is the idea of the one-stop shop, and we found that local and regional authorities have actually a very crucial role to play in the setting up of such one-stop shops, because the market is still unmature. That's what we found. There are very few homeowners who are interested in such global renovation projects, and there are also very little one-stop shops that already exist in the EU. Also now it starts to be a very popular idea, and more territories, what we see, are interested in this concept. Also, the market, the suppliers, the chain of suppliers, they are not really mature yet, and nobody proposes such a global renovation. Also because it takes lots of time in this preliminary pre-investment phases to do all the awareness raising activities to convince homeowners that it's worth to renovate, what the benefits of home renovation are. They don't always, maybe it's also very expensive to do the marketing campaigns based on the market segmentation that are targeted to different groups of homeowners. That's why we think that local authorities and regional authorities play a very crucial role here, because they can, from public, if they consider energy efficiencies as a public service, they can cover all these services or fund these services from the public money, which actually will then result in potentially very high private investments. And the private sector is not really ready to invest in this pre-investment phase, because it takes a lot of time. It's very uncertain. Many people drop out of the process on the way, many customers, and this money is lost for the private company. Public authorities also play a very crucial role in coordination of local actors and training. By coordination, for example, we mean bringing together different actors that meet homeowners on their journey. For example, the financing institutions, real estate agents, the offices that offer or provide the building permits to homeowners, and many different actors, maybe even private companies that would like to get involved, and to whom, for example, local authority could provide its own market gap analysis of the territory and so on. And it's also the training for suppliers and for installers that the local authority can arrange so that they are able to meet the requirements and the expectations of the homeowners. And the last but not least, the role of local authorities should also be the policy making and funding of these initiatives, also if they are, for example, private, so that they can create a really stable environment, stable policy framework that will last for some time. For example, even if they provide subsidies to some private actors who would like to get into the process and develop the business model of the one-stop shop, these have to be rather stable, because from our experience, private companies, or any actually company or actor who tries to set up a one-stop shop, it takes between 5 to 8 years to develop a business model that is viable. So for now, our conclusion from the project is that public support and also public funding is for the moment really necessary to roll out such one-stop shops on the EU territories. So that was to introduce the topic. And I will give sorry, Adrian, there is one more slide here that I forgot. So it's just to say that all the project results and publications and events announcements will be available on the Innovate website. So you are really encouraged to have a look in the upcoming weeks and months. When the project is getting to the end, there will be more and more information and publications with the results of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you for setting the scene so well. I did forget to say in my introduction and guidance that the webinar is being recorded, and indeed the Innovate website will have a link to it, as will the EuroACE website within a couple of working days. Before we get the policy, so now we're going to have a series of policy insights, first of all from the European Parliament, secondly from the expert partner Énergie Demain, and then from industry, our own Vice President from EuroACE. But it's a real pleasure to welcome Kieran Cuff, Green Member of the European Parliament, to address us next and to give us his policy insights from his work at the European Parliament. Kieran, over to you.
Thanks very much, Adrian, and it's a real pleasure to be with you this afternoon. And I was quite taken by Jana's words, particularly her reference to bringing people on their journey. And I think that is a crucial element if we want to ramp up the renovation wave to tackle 3% of European buildings per year. So if I can move on to the first slide, Adrian, and just talk about the purpose of the integrated renovation program, which is to ensure that any and all future renovation programs would be as efficient as possible. Looking at the timeline ahead of us, we've got through the first 2 bullet points on that journey, and we're about to move into next week, the recovery plan being released by the European Commission. Indeed, we're already seeing leaks from that. And then we're moving into shadow meetings and compromises. And the hope is that we then go forward with a vote at the ITRE committee, the Industry and Energy Committee, before the summer recess. And finally, in the autumn, the renovation wave would be released. But even recently, we've had meetings with the Energy Commissioner's office, with Cadbury Simpson's office, and we're heartened by what we're hearing from her. So just moving on to the second slide, if we want to make future renovation programs as efficient as possible, several aspects of a renovation need to be considered. You can renovate a building using very energy efficient building materials and construction techniques. But if the renovation doesn't take into account the locality of the building, its community needs, or even include energy efficiency utilities, then it won't maximize the energy efficiency of the building. And that is at the heart of the concept. So if I can talk in a nutshell on the next slide about the 3-pillar approach, which we conceive as being a means of holistic approach to the wave, and ensuring that renovated buildings will be financially sustainable and also beneficial to local communities. So let me talk about these 3 pillars of what we want to see in the integrated renovation program. The next slide shows the first pillar, and we seek to ensure that renovation programs use only building materials and construction technologies that boost the energy efficiency of the building itself. So this is where things like the embodied energy of the materials that we use, the life cycle of a building, the circularity of the material used shall be considered. Do these materials, are they fostering a circular economy? So as well as this, we want to favour deep and segmented renovations. What do I mean by that? Well, a building tends to be renovated perhaps only once in a generation. So we want to ensure that we don't have to come back time and time again to that building. So we do want to go to a deep renovation at as early a stage as possible. So moving ahead to the next slide and the access to energy efficiency utilities. This pillar seeks to ensure that all renovations incorporate the latest technologies and utilities that maximize the energy efficiency of a renovated building. Renovated buildings should be able to utilize energy-saving utilities, such as on-site renewables, load management and storage devices, including electric vehicle batteries, which have huge potential for balancing the grid, smart charging stations or pre-cabling, and building automation and control systems. So renovations should facilitate smart homes and appliances, and this pillar aims to do so. We also want to ensure that we harness things like grid side flexibility that could reduce energy wastage. So the first pillar deals with the actual physical materials. The second pillar deals with the energy efficiency utilities. And if I could move on to the third pillar, this is where we wish to maximize the community and societal benefits. We need to ensure that renovation programs are at the heart of communities. We know that quite often the trigger points are missed, and the opportunity when a lease changes or when the building ownership changes, that's a golden opportunity to make renovation happen, but all too often this is missed. And we need to communicate what needs to happen and make sure that there's a mechanism to make the community aware. So we want to see renovations implemented where they'll be of the best use. So we want to focus on the worst performing buildings. These tend to be in the residential sector. So if we can get renovations to occur in residential areas with poor performing buildings, we can hit two birds with one stone, so to speak. We can improve the energy efficiency or the carbon output of the worst performing buildings, and we can increase the energy savings of people at risk of energy poverty. And this can really achieve a just transition. So we don't want to see a situation where lots of money and resources are invested into a renovation project only for it to be channeled into a community that doesn't have the proper financial or technical advice. And this brings me into the one-stop shops. And we see the one shops as being a conduit of information for citizens, and they play a hugely important role in ensuring that any planned renovations meet the needs of the locality and communicate with the locality. Because often people make assumptions that, oh, the local authority doesn't do this or the building owner isn't interested. But if there is a physical presence of this one-stop shop, we think it can act to maximize those trigger points. And we see great examples with energy communities that can achieve this, and we're hearing about some around Europe. Here in my own home country of Ireland, we have the energy communities through the Tipperary Cooperative in Ireland, so with the Tipperary Energy Agency. So great things can happen, but we do need to bring people together on this, and that's where the one-stop shop comes into play. So finally, to summarize and move on to my last slide, the question has to be asked, what can the European Union do? Well, we can implement the current energy efficiency framework, the Clean Energy Package and the national energy and climate plans. We can propose legislation that facilitates each of the three pillars set out in the integrated renovation programs. And by the way, we'll see significant funding coming into renovation, but there's a wheelbarrow full of money if we don't have a firm set of plans or a foundation for how that went. That's where we need a new regulatory or legislative on this. And I think we need to include both minimum energy performance standards on the one hand, and we also need to increase the energy efficiency targets as time goes on. And one last point, I think we need to provide financial incentives for one-stop shops in local communities, as well as renovation funding for social housing. So much of our social housing stock is in a poor condition, particularly from an energy perspective. And I think we can achieve a win-win-win by tackling energy poverty, by providing jobs and skills in those communities that need them, and by decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions coming from the buildings that people are living in. So that's a summary of where we're at. The own initiative report that I took on will now be amended by the various political parties. We have, I think, 350 amendments in, so we will have I'm sure, a very robust discussion over the weeks ahead. But I do think there is broad support for this across the political spectrum, and I am confident that we will have a strong outcome and strong support from the European Parliament for the renovation wave. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you very much, Kieran, for those inspiring words. It comforts us to know that this dossier is in such good hands. So good luck with the negotiations. They are always, as you say, robust during the amendments phase of such reports. So now we're going to move on and get policy insights from Énergie Demain, who are the experts engaged in the Innovate project. And I'm delighted to introduce Françoise Refabert, who's going to speak to us on these insights. Françoise, over to you.
Thank you, Adrian. Could you please move forward to the slide? Thank you. So, as just mentioned by Jana, Innovate project gave rise to a lot of questions about the one-stop shops project and their environment. And so it was indeed planned to produce recommendations for policymakers within this EU-funded project. And we have just published a report on this. I think it's still a version, well, it's a draft version, which is not final, because we would be very happy to incorporate comments and questions, especially coming from this webinar. And this report will be available on the Innovate project website. So I'm not going to present the recommendations right now, because I think it's better to explain how we see the stakes, and we explain the challenges of one-stop shops at the moment, which then explains the reasons for the recommendations. So, okay. Yes, so I will just introduce myself indeed. I am co-heading Énergie Demain. We are based in Paris as a consulting firm, and we do our business mostly with public authorities in France, energy, including the energy ministry and state agencies. And we have the pleasure to be within the Innovate project, and we will be starting another EU-funded project. So our focus is really on facilitating energy efficient renovations for households, and we focus on the issue of access to financing, and we strongly believe that yes, the public sector and local authorities are key enablers in this respect. So next slide, please. Yes. So explaining this, we would like to propose to answer the question that you see on the screen. This question actually was asked by Andreas Rundiger, who is a researcher in a French think tank, Institut du Développement Durable et des Relations Internationales. And this question, this is the question which led us to propose to policymakers some proposals to be thought about. And so, could you please go to the next slide? Yes. So here you find back an attempt to explain what is a one-stop shop. I will not go into the details because it has been explained by Jana already. And what is striking is that in theory, yes, indeed, you should be able to make energy renovation straightforward and easygoing with a single point of contact. But on the ground, there is no single model to be referred to, and most of the one-stop shops do not cover the full service, which is needed to enable most of households to go through this project. So next slide. We believe that the reason why one-stop shops are so diverse in their attempts to set up a business model is because they are trying to address the shortcomings in the retrofit market precisely. I mean that there are already existing trades in the renovation sector, of course, such as construction brokers, architects, project managers, etc., etc. These people, they do not seek, or they are not even able to address these shortfalls, and they are led to cover only a small part of the potential demand for coordination and quality of renovations. Whereas one-stop shops really are involved in trying to develop the market. And so this is why one-stop shops are mostly undertaken by the public sector, and namely local authorities, because they are the sponsors of the transition to a low-carbon economy. So we believe that we should agree on a definition, and it should be related to the objectives, because the attempt to find a definition based on what is going on the ground is not accurate. And we have this proposition. We put it on the table to define one-stop shop as a way to optimize the cost of energy savings and reduced CO2 emissions through the renovation of the private housing stocks borne by the community. I mean, it's the cost which is borne by the community, which should be optimized. And we really believe that this is a basis as a definition which is consistent with the idea that the one-stop shop is a service of general economic interest. And based on this, it is a concept in the state aid regime. It means that it is possible to develop a sustainable business case which would be based on public-private partnership, and where the business model of the one-stop shop incorporates both fees earned from the final users, which are the homeowners, but also from the public, the community, because one-stop shops are really aiming to develop these long-term and strategic objectives. Next slide, please. And there is also another reason why defining this one-stop shop in this way is important, is because we would like to stress that one-stop shops need really to be incorporated into a chain with the other instruments which are provided in European directives. And just to take an example, the EPCs, the energy performance certificates, yes, they should be improved, and they even should be upgraded to be incorporated in building renovation passports. Such passports, it's really difficult to implement them right now, because it's as the other service provided by a one-stop shop, people are not so eager to pay for it in advance. They don't really see the service and the value for them. Whereas if one-stop shops have the opportunity to introduce homeowners with the usage of such building renovation passports when they advise them and build with them their own project for retrofit, then we see that this tool, if it is considered as incorporated in the public sector, it can become very useful to local and to national authorities as a source of monitoring their own public policies in favor of housing improvement. And another example, as mentioned earlier, is that one-stop shop I mean, the citizen energy communities themselves, which are encouraged in the recast electricity directive, could act as one-stop shops. It's another example. Next, yeah, thank you. And And finally, the business model for one-stop shops, it's also necessary to incorporate it in a chain, because actually one-stop shops may not depend only on local initiatives. It requires quite a lot of investment, quite a lot of integration. And for instance, it makes sense to consider that investing in tools and optimizing costs should be made at a national level, whereas local hubs and all the labor-intensive advisory activities have to be implemented locally. And in the middle, you have plenty of things to do and projects to develop, for instance, at regional level. So to come back to this idea that the one-stop shops would need to be defined on a new basis, if I may say, I think that's really at the level of European institutions, it should be clarified if when we talk about one-stop shops, we talk about merely the advisors which are in contact with the public, or if we use this term to mean a set of action which is established at different scales and under the coordination of the member states and the local authorities. And our personal view is that the second option is more realistic. Next slide. Finally, regarding the financing, as Jana mentioned it, it's really key that one-stop shop help people to finance the renovations. Banks, they have an interest in directing their financing towards sustainable spendings. So they are already, and they can be even more important prescribers for efficient renovations. And this is why we really think that the one-stop shop should also refer to the objectives of reaching a carbon neutral economy through the taxonomy criteria, the taxonomy directive, which is aiming at setting rules that should follow all the financial area in order to avoid greenwashing. And so regarding the expansion of the range of financing, it is clear that it means taking more risks, and it's not necessarily what can be easily asked to banks. This is why we really think that at the level of member states, and even better at the level of European institutions, we should look the prospect of public guarantees. And as mentioned earlier, we really think that one-stop shops based on local initiatives are there to optimize the management of the various risks which are related to the energy renovations, and which are, by the way, mostly taken by the building owners themselves. And to consider this is a way to reduce this risk also when we discuss about financing these refurbishments. So basically, I would like to go to the last slide, because it is explaining with a scheme an idea which I believe is really to be connected to our to the COVID situation. Because I mean, of course, extending the access to landing is key, but we have to consider that a large number of people are in risk of getting over-indebted. So it's time to think about also how we could finance or help finance the refurbishment with a carbon finance scheme, where in fact, carbon assets are endorsed by the monetary institutions. And what does that mean? It means that when you make a refurbishment, it means that if it is made properly, and if there is some measurement and reporting verification, then you may have certainty about the fact that there will be reductions in carbon emissions, and this is made an asset. This asset is it is able to finance the piece of all the renovation quality and compliance that is being set up by the one-stop shop, and so finance the obligation of one-stop shops related to their status of service of general interest. It is a way also to fund a European financing instrument, a guarantee, and which could enhance the loans that are making possible to finance the renovation loans. And finally, it is also a mean to reward the homeowners and to help them finance the energy renovation of their homes. Because if these carbon remediation assets are positioned as a high enough price, then you could make it cover a substantial part of the renovation cost. And so this is the idea that we would like to put on the table for discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Françoise, for that deep dive into several key aspects of the one-stop shop model and for that creative idea at the end. I see that we are getting already a number of interesting questions, but I encourage you now during the last presentation to continue writing your questions into the chat box for the attention of everyone. And then I will moderate a question and answer session after our last presentation. And for that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Céline Carré. She is Vice President of EuroACE and works at Saint-Gobain. And she's going to give us a policy insight on one-stop shops from the industry perspective. Céline, over to you.
So thanks, everyone. I'm delighted to be with you. I think we were talking about a chain of one-stop shop. What I see is a trend also of webinars on this very interesting topic that will hopefully help structure the renovation wave. You can move to the next slide, Adrian. This is going to be very brief ahead of our discussion. I just wanted to reflect on the topic of one-stop shop in the light of what we are discussing at European level, knowing that we had a recent round of intense discussion when we discussed the clean energy package and the revision of the EPBD, the long-term renovation strategies, and now is the time to develop new input as well. And the idea is to think about one-stop shop benefits, the limitation, and think about what the renovation wave can do about it. So I feel it's really inspiring to see the multiplication of those models. It's certainly not enough, but we see that it's a true vehicle for local economic activity, local booster, and especially in this post-COVID recovery time, we're talking about resilience. And for me, it's really a vehicle for local economic and social resilience. It has integrated in a way the idea of leave no one behind that was anchored in the Green Deal, so it's already concrete, and we can see that it works. I think it's very important also to point to the fact that one-stop shop lift both the real and the perceived barriers to renovation. We talk a lot about access to finance, which is one of the barriers, but certainly not the only one. The complexity of the work that leads people wanting to do renovation to sometimes delay, postpone, or not do anything. the administrative burden, but also the information gap, which I think is too often overlooked in a matter of renovation. Individual homeowners are not necessarily meant to become experts in designing renovation program yet. This is what they have to do when they want to embark into renovation. And I think that the one-stop shop models definitely answers that question. And then looking into our EU our policy goals and the 2050 commitment that we have, I think it's very nice to hear that those tools are also designed to sort of capture the potential of energy savings and energy efficiency in our building stock, and to reduce the risk of locking effect. That would mean that works are not conducted in all the steps that is needed to make buildings compatible with climate neutrality. And the last point, from what I see in the way they are structured, it encourages training and quality enhancement by all of the workforce, and it gives a purpose for better for the different trades working on building to work together. I think it's quite powerful, I would say. Yes, and yeah, all in all, it probably we wonder a lot about acceleration of demands. We hear about stagnating figure of renovation rate, and this is an accelerator of demand that we need to count on, and I think it should be recognized as such. You can move to the next slide, Adrian. Obviously, what we hear as well is a number of limitations. Obviously, the model is relatively new. It is time and resource intensive in a way that it has taken time to develop the models. It is interesting because this resource and time and intensity means that there are lots of value and jobs behind. So that needs to be taken into consideration. I wonder about basically if the lack of recognition of the role of one-stop shop so far in public policies, be it at national or at European level, isn't linked to the lack of appreciation of the nature of the market failure and the coordination gap that is in renovation. We hear a lot, as I just mentioned, about the financing gap. We hear about whether we have the right technologies, about whether people want to do it, but we see that sometimes even when financing is there, just people don't dare going to renovation and taking the offers. So there is this appreciation which needs to be placed in at the right level in the renovation wave. The economic viability, and from what I understand from the examples shown, and I had the chance of listening to some of you in the Innovate project during the last Covenant of Mayor event in February in Brussels, but also last week Open Gela workshop on the same topic. We wonder about the viability of the model. Sometimes maybe you will correct me. I have the feeling that there is a lot of investment in those projects without knowing necessarily how the economics would look like after 5 or 7 or 10 years, and I link that to the lacking demand drivers in the renovation market. And I think that is something that has to be fixed in order to improve this economic viability. Yes, and then the scalability will come through a better knowledge of what model fits in which economic and social ecosystem. It will also come with a better granularity in our long-term renovation strategies. In EuroACE, we are calling, and some of you participated to earlier workshops, for a strong focus on segments. We should be able, with the data that we have, to derive segment approach, and I think one-stop shop can marvelously fit into such model and having a better visibility on what we want to do in each segment in terms of renovated buildings there 5 or 10 years will help also structure this part of the market. And finally, I would wonder also if the evaluation of the benefits of the one-stop shop is always sufficiently open and not too narrow-minded. I think we have to consider the role for the multiple benefits of energy efficiency generated in a local area, and not just the return on investment. Adrian, you can move to the next and final slide. So there are here a few ideas on the topic. First, I would also like to say that within EuroACE, we buy into some of the work that were put to the topic by Kara and Cuff on the topic in terms of clarifying the energy efficiency ambition in especially the targets towards 2030 needs to be aligned with our carbon neutrality commitments to 2050. And also, I would say that we need a clear roadmap to decarbonize our buildings. The role of buildings needs to be better known in public policies. This is not yet the case. And we also support a clear mechanism for financing building renovation via dedicated building renovation fund. But besides this, I think that what would really help one-stop shop to take off would indeed be those targets and milestones and the segment approach I've just mentioned it. Giving visibility is not just for a paper exercise in a long-term renovation strategy to be handed out to the European Commission. And here I can make a small parenthesis that we are still waiting for far too many long-term renovation strategies. We only have seen, I think, 6 of them so far. Visibility here is to align the perspectives of actors in the market that is very, I would say, varied, but also fragmented. So the beauty of it is to find lots of different facets. The difficulty is to align perspective. And this is the purpose of having targets and milestones. Minimum energy performance requirements, I believe, would also help the business model of one-stop shop in the way that the people that are approached and shared and who get the recommendations and the communication, they do not always follow all the steps and go towards renovation work. Yes, if they would know that after 5 or 10 years there is such regulatory milestone as is being explored in some member states currently, then obviously the appetite to undertake the work would grow. And a couple of other things. I'm conscious of time. I think that there are good synergies to be made via digital, using the potential of digital technologies for mapping the potential in local areas, and I think that can really be accelerated so that one-stop shop have access to those data when starting their businesses. I would also mention the dynamics of EU financing of this renovation wave to clarify the role of cities and local authorities will also naturally foster the coordination and the liaison role of one-stop shops. Not least, we have an enormous challenge in this renovation wave with skills, and to see the job being done by people working in one-stop shop, I think, should open the minds of next generation to embark in such curricula. It is not only technical skills, it is also management skills, financing skills, psychological skills to convince the people that are necessary. And I think that is also a good message for the policymakers. To engage the younger generation in the renovation wave. Last thing is, yeah, and as I mentioned, the the benefits should be evaluated in a much more comprehensive manner. So just to conclude, I think with the renovation wave, we have a key opportunity to join the dots and to create mutually reinforcing synergies between what we have as policy tools, as financing schemes at EU and national level, and within this, structure the value chain where one-stop shop can really, I think, accelerate the change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Celine, for completing the presentations and for those insights and questions around one-stop shops. So now I'm going to thank the participants because you've sent in some very interesting questions already. Please feel free to continue doing so. We have a short 20 minutes to go through the questions, and I will try to group them as best as I can. But where I'd like to start is with a question for Kieran Cuff, the MEP, and it's from Pierre Crouveillet. The question is, the current renovation rate has to be increased. Someone has their microphone unmuted. Could everyone please mute? Thank you. The current renovation rate has to be increased, and energy efficiency alone may not be a sufficient lever to convince enough people to engage in works. Moreover, in a COVID-19 crisis situation, it is more than ever important to secure a healthy indoor environment for building occupants. In your view, does renovation also address the health aspect of buildings, and how could it be included in a one-stop shop process? Kieran, some thoughts on that?
Well, I think it should. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has involved many of us spending long periods of time at home, and we've become much more aware of the health aspects of indoor life. And as we look at the buildings that we dwell in, I think it allows us to reflect on how healthy they are. And there can be a challenge as we renovate buildings. There can be a challenge to ensure that we still satisfy criteria on minimum air changes per hour, and that we also ensure that we don't have off-gassing from materials that are used for renovation. And we do state in the report that it is important that energy efficient buildings are safe and sustainable, and that we address sustainability in buildings. So I think the emphasis on indoor health is an important one. It's brought into sharp relief by the COVID-19 crisis, and we need to ensure that our regulation, whether it be at a European, at a union level or at a national level, reflects the complexity of ensuring a healthy indoor air quality. And we need to be careful that insulation improvements aren't compromising other aspects of a building in terms of air circulation and related issues.
So holistic approaches, Kieran, being promoted, appropriately designed for each project.
Absolutely. And in a sense, that brings me on to another question from Simon McGuinness, where he suggests that we don't underestimate the skills that are needed. And we do talk specifically in point 25 about the need for a European skills initiative in the renovation sector to engage with stakeholders in retraining, upskilling and capacity building. Not forgetting the gender dimension there. So we do need to improve our skill sets. That can take a lot of time and effort to realize. There are mechanisms like the ELENA facility from the European Investment Bank that can help on technical assistance, but we need to ensure that we don't have contractors executing poor work. So we do need to ensure that there is a an emphasis placed on skill levels and certification.
Thank you very much, Kieran. So I see there are a number of themes coming through in the questions, and running right up to the first question from Fiona Riddock. It reads, is there a role for verification, certification of final performance of deep renovations to encourage more take-up? I wonder if Françoise, although she addressed that to Kieran, but maybe Françoise, you might express a view on that or give an answer.
Yes, with pleasure. I think that indeed one-stop shop should put more emphasis on the key element of value to be brought to the customers, to the citizens, to improve certainty about the quality of works. And of course, there are regulations in place in all countries, but it is a characteristics of individual housing that it's very difficult to implement quality checks and so on. So basically, I really think that one-stop shop should emphasize this aspect. And it means extra costs, but it means also avoided risks. And at the end of the day, I really think that it would help people pay a fee, because they would see it as allowing them to get rid of a lot of risks. And in this prospect, I would just like to mention that together with Energy Cities and the French Société de Tiers Financement, third-party financing, which are extensive one-stop shops set up at regional level in France. We are going to start from June a new H2020 project, which is based namely on the fact that we would like to develop a quality guarantee with the insurance sector, so that people are really reassured that their investment has been worth doing for at least 20 years.
Thank you, Françoise. Indeed, there's a number of other questions around warranties and guarantees, but let me move on to a different question from a name I find hard to pronounce, Pavliuk. The question relates to setting binding requirements for less performing buildings, and is, what are the instruments to pursue or enforce efforts on the owners of buildings if they do not want to take any action in improving energy performance? And I think I'd like to ask Céline maybe to comment on that. So what instruments can we use to set minimum performance standards on low performing buildings?
Yeah, so there are various instruments and dynamics in place. You would see requirements such as, from a given date, your building should be at minimum class of the energy performance certificate. So this has been deployed in the UK and the rental sector. This is also going to be in place in France with a dynamic to, let's say, phase out worst performing buildings called passoire énergétique. You could also imagine to implement such works when technical works are being planned. For example, technical works on the facade, then you have to obligatory check its performance and implement works. You can also imagine that at the point of sale, then if the building doesn't meet a certain minimum requirement, then it has to be done. And if it's not done, and I've seen some mechanism explored but not yet implemented, you could set aside a price of the house that could then serve for the next building owner to implement the work. So the mechanisms are quite various, and we see some creativity in the field. Now I'm not that well placed detail how to enforce those schemes. I think they are all relatively new. Probably looking into some work currently undertaken by the Building Performance Institute. We would find some additional answers on the topic. But yes, it is a question also of enforcement, if this was your question. You need to pay attention into this.
Very good, Celine, thank you. And then running back up the questions, I see, coming back to the question of warranties, Joanna Varghese has asked the question, do completed projects have warranties? Does the local authority provide this? And Simon McGuinness has answered, public guarantees would be very welcome, even transformative. But I wonder, Jana from Energy Cities, are local authorities in a position to provide such warranties? Have they a willingness to do so? What's your experience?
Yes, so I think that it's like what François said before, if the local one-stop shops are run by local authorities, which is the case, for example, in France, in all the existing one-stop shops, then these one-stop shops actually provide the guarantee. It's not the local authority itself, but the one-stop shop that guarantees the quality of the works that were implemented. Also, there is not an official certification scheme in place. That's the objective of the new project on which we are going to work. Yeah, so not directly local authorities, but that would be the role of the one-stop shops.
Okay.
And I have to say that from our experience as well, there are very few one-stop shops at the moment who provide guarantees to achieve a certain level of energy savings, let's say. Mm-hmm. It's easier to guarantee the quality of works, but to achieve energy savings and to function as a real ESCO, let's say, in the residential sector, that's something that we don't see that many examples so far.
And Diana, in a follow-up question or a related question from Urs Zokole, the question is, do the contractors offered by the one-stop shop, are they qualified by the one-stop shop? I take that to mean, do the one-stop shops decide on who gets on a list that can then be recommended to owners?
Yes, so this is quite a tricky issue, for example, for local authorities, because many of them are reluctant to recommend certain private companies. It's not their roles, but some of them, they create local certificates or quality label schemes with which the suppliers, the contractors have to comply. And in some cases, the one-stop shops, like for example, the Rijnmarkt one-stop shop in the Netherlands that is run by our partner KAW, they select the one-stop shops, the suppliers on the basis of their own quality requirements. And these requirements, or there are some after 1 or 2 renovations, then they stop suppliers. So this is the way to guarantee that the works will be done properly. So in that case, yes, they select and they sometimes even train them. Okay, very interesting. Coming back to you, Kieran, I see a question. You had mentioned a just transition in your presentation, and there's a question from Helen Scheller saying, what strategies do you have to take up to ensure a just transition? And she suggests 2, no rents going up, gentrification. You might be able to make a link to the other own initiative report on affordable and decent housing in your answer. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge that a renovated building will attract higher rents, and this could lead to evictions and gentrification. Indeed, we specifically mention the term renoviction in the report itself, and I'm aware of the experience in some German cities where renovation has been the pretext for steep rent increases. And I think there is a need at national or local level to ensure that this is minimized, but it is always there in the background. I think we're also suggesting that we target those most in need initially. And I think there is a compelling case to look at local authority or low-income housing, whether it be owned by local authorities or social housing providers. And there is a large stock of housing units that have the same typology and that have not been received a deep renovation in many years, and whose residents are living on a limited income. And I do think that the neighbourhood approach can assist us in tackling this particular group of buildings at an early stage. And I think it's much easier to bundle up these projects to attract the kind of financing that comes from the European Investment Bank. So I would see it as an opportunity to achieve progress on energy poverty. I think the renovation wave can allow us to select and prioritize particular neighborhoods and particular building topologies and tenures, and in doing so, to tackle those most in need at an early stage.
Great, Kieran. Thanks for that clear answer. So I'm going to go to a last question. In fact, I'm going to link two questions because they talk particularly about certain metrics that go with one-stop shops. The first, and I'm going to address this to Françoise, but if other speakers would like to come in, they might just say so in the chat box. So to Françoise from Elodie Denizard, from the Hauts-de-France, who have a big experience, they say they can see that the cost of accompaniment of a one-stop shop is about 10% of the deep renovation cost. And the deployment of that one-stop shop at local level is a key vector for local economic recovery and an answer to climate goals. The question is Innovate able also to communicate on the real investment needed from the public side versus the private investment? That's her question. But I would like to link it to a second question further down from Anne-Sophie Legendre, asking, have ratios been identified as a number of advisors per 1,000 renovations or the minimum cost of a one-stop shop? I suppose the setup costs. So Françoise, could you maybe just address those? And as I say, other speakers, let me know in the chat box if you want to make a last comment. Otherwise, we'll go straight to conclusions after Françoise.
Okay, so we are indeed able to provide with some figures. Most of them coming from the experiences in France of Société de Tiers Financement. Actually, within the frame of Innovate, since the scope of the project was to help local authorities to set up their own scheme, we have not so much data. However, we did the exercise with experienced partners and we shared our views. And so basically, first you have to be cautious about expressing costs as percentage, because really on top of the difficulty to discuss about figures, you have to figure out that average amount of refurbishments are very wide. For instance, in France, average is below 5,000 euros. But if you take the renovations which are made by third-party financing, then it's above 30,000 euros. So basically, I would agree with the figure mentioned by Elodie Denizard, but lower it rather in the range to 6 to 7% for a range of refurbishment, which cost, let's say, 30 to 32,000 euros for a single house. So this is about the figures, and about well, I mean, for a cost of, let's say, 2,000 euros, what do you get for this? I really think that then you have to go back to this idea of customer journey, and to understand that you will need to see the household, the homeowners on such and such circumstances, and broadly speaking, we see that in France, this kind of advisory and accompaniment is worth, let's say, about 10 to 15 hours. So it's really labor intensive, and I don't see how you can manage to lower this cost, which has, however, a big value, as it has been mentioned by many speakers. So since the outcome of all this labor is ensuring a consistency of the renovation with the community objectives of lowering the energy, well, lowering the energy consumption and carbon emissions, then I really think that, as I mentioned it, it's a case for a mixed public-private business case based on the idea of economic, public and economic interest service.
Thank you very much, Françoise. So I'm going to apologize to those whose questions were not answered. We will forward them to the speakers and hopefully get back to you with answers in a short space of time. Just before I hand over to Jana, who will give conclusions and close our session, I want to thank again our speakers. I want to thank you, the public, and for the very good interaction that we've had on this crucially important topic. Jana, over to you for conclusions and final words.
Thank you very much, Adrian. So I think that the topic of housing energy renovation is very complex, and 1 hour is never enough to discuss everything, which is a little bit frustrating. We have within the Innovate project lots of policy recommendations for policymakers at European and at member states level, because these policies are really crucial for creating a stable and coherent framework for all the actors, while cities and regions act at a local level, and they can, because of their knowledge of the local context, they are able to mobilize citizens and businesses, and they can set also local policy objectives and support mechanisms to move this topic forward. I would like to say that we really welcome all the new initiatives of the EU on the renovation, like the Renovation Way, for example, or the European Parliament's ITRE committee on maximizing the energy efficiency potential of the EU building stock that was piloted by Kjörn, and which gave quite prominent place to integrated home renovation programs and one-stop shops. I think this is a big step forward. And we would we think that it is crucial that these future initiatives and funds that are planned by the EU, such as the new Recovery and Convergence Instrument or the European Renovation Financing Facility, or the probably planned revision of the state aid rules, that these build really on the experiences and knowledge of the existing one-stop shops, because so many of them, they have had experience of 10 years already, a very practical and on-the-ground experience. So I would suggest that we try to listen as well to their suggestions on how to remove the existing barriers that are still hindering a massive and ambitious building renovation. And we would be really happy, together with partners like Energiedema, EuroACE, Innovate partners and others, to help the EU institutions and member states with our detailed and hands-on policy recommendations or any personal exchanges that we might have to help to move the rollout of the to accelerate the rollout of the one-stop shops across Europe. And also, as our project is getting to the end, we will have lots of recommendations and guidance for local and regional authorities who are planning to set up such one-stop shops. And you're always very welcome to contact us directly if not all the information is provided in these final documents and on our website. So yeah, we encourage you to keep an eye on the results of the project and also on all the future initiatives that are prepared at different levels. And we are looking forward as Energy Cities to cooperate with all the partners who are really eager to boost the one-stop shops development across Europe. And thank you very much to all for your participation.